Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. I'd really value your comment. It helps me know whether this landed for you and what I can do better in the next chapters. One of the most dangerous assumptions you can make is believing that someone who loves you will wait forever. I learned that lesson the hard way, not in a blaze of arguments, but in the quiet way my marriage withered. Each time my wife exhaled with relief whenever I stopped trying to reach her. What came after still shadows her, even if she'll never admit it began with her own choices. It began on a Wednesday night in October, 3 years into what I believed was a sturdy marriage. We were winding down for the evening, running through our ritual of brushing teeth, swapping day clothes for sleepwear, and preparing to drift off. The bedroom felt familiar, warm, lived in. We'd occupied that space for years, but lately it had started to resemble a hotel room where two strangers coincidentally shared a bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress and watched her move through her skincare routine. Deliberate, precise, the same exacting control she applied to everything else. Under the lamp's soft glow, she looked beautiful. And for a moment that old pull tugged at me. The simple wish to connect with the woman I'd vowed to love for life. I reached out and touched her shoulder. A gentle, easy gesture. No pressure, no demand. Just the kind of natural affection that used to be second nature between us. Her response was instant and completely expected. "Not tonight, honey. I'm just exhausted." But the part that snagged my attention, the reason this rejection didn't feel like all the rest, was her expression. She didn't look apologetic. She didn't even look worn out. She looked relieved. Like someone who had successfully sidestepped something unpleasant. The relief of letting a sales call go to voicemail. The release of ducking a tedious meeting. I saw a tangible release in her eyes, then in the way her shoulders softened, as if some invisible cord had been clipped. That tiny flicker of relief set my focus. It made me start noticing all the things I'd been too trusting, too hopeful, or maybe just too naive to see. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 3. Early on, like most couples who genuinely want each other, intimacy was easy and frequent. Something we both anticipated. It wasn't only about sex. We'd lace fingers during a movie, lean in for random kisses while we stirred pasta on the stove, invent excuses to brush against each other throughout the day. Touch was our dialect when words weren't enough. Somewhere along the way, that language became foreign to her. What used to connect us began to feel like something that happened to her, not something she desired. The change crept in slowly enough that I kept adjusting without examining what it meant. Every new normal arrived in gentle steps, and I told myself each one was temporary. We slipped from the spontaneous ease of newlyweds to a few times a week, with an unspoken schedule. Then weekly, often on a Saturday after we'd had a good day together. Then every couple of weeks, and even then, it felt like a task she checked off rather than something she craved. By the time the truth took shape, we were at maybe once a month. And even that felt like my wants were an interruption, a calendar conflict with her real life. Her explanations evolved right alongside the frequency. Early on, if she wasn't feeling it, she'd say so plainly, and we'd pivot to something else. Talk late, hold each other, find some other version of closeness. A no didn't feel like a door slamming because another door opened. As time passed, the no's turned more intricate and more absolute. Work pressure, headaches, stomach discomfort, early meetings, late nights, tired from working out, tired from not working out enough. There was always a reason, and more often, the reason came with no alternative. The refusals weren't reroutes anymore. They were walls. It wasn't the occasional no that bothered me. Life happens. People hit limits. Stress takes bites out of everyone. It was the pattern that got under my skin. More specifically, it was that clear flash of relief I began to catch when I backed off. It wasn't only that she didn't want closeness. It was that she seemed genuinely happier when I didn't want it either. On Thursday night, I decided to run a quiet test. Instead of offering gentle touches or subtle signals, the standard dance we'd been locked in, I slipped into bed, said goodnight, and turned to my side. No reaching, no hints, no energy around the possibility of anything more. Just two people sharing a mattress for convenience. The shift in her was immediate and obvious. She stayed loose and easy the entire evening. More talkative over dinner, asking questions and actually sitting with my answers. More animated while we watched TV, laughing at bits that would typically earn a polite exhale. More at ease during our bedtime routine, even humming to herself while she brushed her teeth. The removal of any romantic expectations seemed to genuinely brighten her. She felt like the woman I'd fallen for, except for the part where she clearly preferred me not wanting her. Friday, I repeated the test. Same posture, kept my distance, made no moves, eliminated any sense of tension around intimacy, treated her like a good friend I happened to bunk with. Again, she loosened. She talked more, relaxed more, participated more. Saturday morning, she even initiated a hug while we made breakfast, something I hadn't felt from her in months. By Saturday night, I knew I was running an experiment with questionable sanity, but I needed to understand my own life. I had to know whether I was observing something real or projecting frustration onto everyday moments. That night, I not only skipped any physical approach, I made a point of seeming genuinely uninterested. I read a book in bed while she scrolled videos on her phone. Kept conversation airy and neutral, no romance, no weight. Treated her like a friendly roommate. I wanted to know if her calmer mood was just about removing pressure, or if it hinted at something deeper. She glowed with contentment. She chatted about her sister's upcoming birthday, mapped out a girls' day the following weekend, even suggested we try a new restaurant downtown. The social spark and planning energy that had been missing for months sprang back, right when I wasn't trying to draw closer. Sunday morning, she hummed over breakfast, a sound I hadn't heard in ages. She was chatty, warm in non-physical ways, and seemed sincerely happy to be in the same space with me. She made jokes, traded gossip from book club, even complimented my shirt, all after I'd spent 3 straight days not wanting her. That's when the truth landed with uncomfortable weight. It wasn't only that she avoided intimacy. She felt better when I avoided it too. The ideal version of us, for her, was one where I had no desire for her at all. So I started watching more closely, not with suspicion, but with the clarity of someone finally seeing their marriage without the fog. When I slid my hand toward hers during a show, there was a faint tightening, a barely there stiffening that said my touch wasn't welcome. When I wrapped my arms around her from behind while she cooked, she went a little rigid, enduring contact rather than leaning into it. When I proposed we shower together, she produced a small parade of reasons. The water pressure, the timing, the sudden need to call her mother. But if I kept my hands to myself, held emotional distance, and treated her like a companion rather than a spouse, she was peaceful and buoyant. She'd curl into the far corner of the couch, perfectly content with the space between us. She'd talk freely about her day, her errands, her takes on books and shows, everything except our relationship. She was most herself when I wasn't trying to be close. Romantic gestures, no attempts at intimacy, no subtle suggestions or hopeful glances. I decided to give her exactly what she seemed to want, which was a husband who didn't want her. The change in her demeanor was immediate and dramatic. It was like watching someone relax after months of holding their breath. Monday night, when bedtime came and went without any approach from me, she was visibly more relaxed. She read her book peacefully, made pleasant conversation about her day at the marketing firm where she worked, seemed genuinely content. There was no tension, no anticipation of having to deflect unwanted attention, no need to prepare excuses or brace herself for disappointment when she had to reject Megan. Tuesday was even better from her perspective. She started planning activities that would keep us busy but separate. A girls' night out for Friday, a solo yoga class on Saturday morning, a book club meeting Sunday afternoon. She was actively creating a schedule that minimized our time alone together, and she was doing it with obvious enthusiasm. "I'm thinking of taking that pottery class I mentioned," she said over dinner Tuesday night. "It's Thursday evenings for 6 weeks. "That sounds great," I replied, genuinely meaning it. If pottery made her happy, she should do pottery. "And Sarah wants to do a weekend trip to that spa upstate next month. Would you mind if I went?" A few months ago, I might have minded. Not because he wanted to control her activities, but because I would have wanted to go with her, or at least missed her while she was gone. Now, the idea of a weekend to myself sounded perfectly fine. "Of course not. You should go." She smiled with what looked like genuine gratitude. "You're sounderstanding. I really appreciate that you're not clingy like some husbands." Clingy. Wanting to spend time with my wife made me clingy. Wednesday, she commented to her sister during a phone call, which I overheard from the kitchen while making coffee. "Things are so much better now. He's finally understanding my needs and not being so pushy about everything." Pushy. Wanting intimacy with my wife made me pushy. I stood there, stirring sugar into my coffee, listening to her describe my previous attempts at connection as character flaws that I'd fortunately outgrown. She talked about me like I was a problem that had been solved, a source of pressure that had been eliminated. Thursday, she seemed to interpret my emotional distance as a sign that I was finally accepting the new dynamic she preferred. She became more talkative about everything except a relationship, more planning-oriented about activities that kept us busy but apart, more comfortable in general. She started making decisions about her social calendar without consulting me. Not because she was being inconsiderate, but because she'd apparently decided I didn't need or want to be included. By Friday, exactly 1 week into my experiment, She made a comment that crystallized everything I'd been observing. "You know," she said while we were having dinner at the kitchen table, "I really appreciate how you've been lately. It's nice to just be comfortable without all the pressure." I put down my fork and looked at her directly. "What pressure?" "You know, the expectation that we have to be physical all the time. It's so much better when we can just enjoy each other's company without all that drama." "Drama?" She called my desire for physical connection with my wife drama. "So, you're happier when I don't want to be intimate with you?" I asked as directly as possible. She paused, probably realizing how that sounded when stated so bluntly, but then doubled down instead of backtracking. "I'm happier when I don't feel pressured to be something I'm not." "What exactly are you not?" "I'm not someone who needs all that physical stuff to be happy in a relationship." "I thought you understood that by now." "I mean, we're adults. We can have a mature relationship without being all over each other constantly." Constantly. We've been intimate maybe 6 times in the past year, and she described my desire for more as wanting it constantly. "But I am someone who needs that to be happy in a marriage," he said quietly. "Well, maybe you need to adjust your expectations. Not everyone is obsessed with sex. Some of us value emotional connection and intellectual compatibility more than physical stuff." Obsessed. Wanting normal marital intimacy made me obsessed. "Maybe I'd done it to adjust my expectations," I said, meaning something entirely different than what she heard. She smiled clearly, thinking she had won something important. "Exactly. See, this is how it should be. We can be happy without all the complications. We can focus on what really matters." "And what really matters?" I asked. "Friendship, companionship, shared goals, emotional support, all the things that last when physical attraction fades." She was describing a business partnership, not a marriage. She was outlining a relationship model where passion was not just unnecessary, but actively unwelcome. That night, I lay in bed listening to her breathe peacefully beside me, realizing that my wife had just told me she was happiest when I didn't want her. She had celebrated the death of physical intimacy in our marriage and expected me to celebrate with her. More than that, she had reframed my acceptance of this death as maturity, as personal growth, as evidence that I was finally becoming the kind of husband she could be comfortable with. The second week of November, I continued the experiment, but now with full awareness of what I was documenting, she had settled completely into the new routine. No more excuses needed because there were no more approaches to deflect. No more attention because there were no more expectations to manage. No more careful timing of rejections because there was nothing to reject. She started talking about me differently to her friends. And I heard fragments of phone conversations that revealed how she'd reframed our relationship. She described me as finally mature enough to understand boundaries and not needy anymore. She'd reframed my withdrawal as personal growth rather than recognizing it as emotional distance. He's learned to appreciate what we have instead of always wanting more. I heard her tell her friend Janet during a Saturday morning phone call. "It's so refreshing to be with someone who doesn't make everything about physical needs. Physical needs like wanting intimacy with your spouse with some kind of character weakness." Monday of the 3rd week, she mentioned during dinner that their friend Sarah's husband still expected romance all the time and how exhausting that must be for Sarah. She seemed genuinely grateful that I wasn't like other husbands who wanted their wives to want them. She had created a narrative where my desire for her had been a burden and my loss of that desire was a gift. Tuesday, she planned a weekend trip with her sister for the following month. Not asking if I minded, just informing me of her plans. "Lisa and I are going to that new spa resort update the weekend of December 10th. Already booked it a few months ago." This would have hurt. Not because I wanted to control her travel, but because the casual assumption that I wouldn't want to be included would have stung. Now, it just confirmed what I already knew. She was actively creating more space between us. Apparently, under the assumption that I preferred it this way. Wednesday, I decided to test one more thing. During a casual conversation while we were both reading in the living room, I asked her directly, "Are you happy in our marriage?" She looked up from her book with genuine surprise, as if the question itself was strange. "Very happy? Why would you ask that?" "Just curious. Sometimes it's good to check in. Things are so much better now that we're not constantly dealing with all those expectations and tensions. I feel like we can finally just be ourselves. What if I told you I wasn't happy?" She set down her book and looked at me with what appeared to be genuine confusion. "Why wouldn't you be happy? Everything is so peaceful now. We don't fight. We don't have all that drama. We just enjoy each other's company." "Peaceful for you? What about what I need?" "You're getting what you need. We have a stable relationship without all the drama and pressure. We talk, we laugh, we support each other. Isn't that what marriage should be about? What if what I need includes physical intimacy?" Here expression shifted to something between annoyance and condescension. "Then you need to decide what's more important, some physical stuff or a good marriage." because you can't have both if it means making your partner uncomfortable. There it was. In her mind, physical intimacy and a good marriage were mutually exclusive. She genuinely believed that a marriage without physical connection was superior to one with it. She had created a framework where wanting intimacy with your spouse was inherently selfish, and demanding it was inherently abusive. Thursday evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she made another comment that revealed how completely she'd rewritten our relationship history. "I'm so glad we worked through all those issues we had early in our marriage," she said while loading the dishwasher. "What issues?" "You know, when you were always pressuring me for physical stuff. I was worried we weren't compatible, but you've really grown as a person. You've learned to value the important things." She had retroactively redefined the early passion in our relationship as a problem that needed solving. The attraction that had brought us together was now framed as immature behavior that I'd fortunately outgrown. Thursday night, she made the comment that ended everything. We were watching TV, sitting on opposite ends of the couch with a careful space between us. When she stretched and said with obvious contentment, "This is perfect. This is exactly how marriage should be. Comfortable, peaceful, no pressure, no expectations. I'm so glad you finally understand what really matters." She had just described her ideal marriage as one where her husband didn't want her. She was celebrating the absence of desire, the elimination of passion, the death of physical connection, and she expected me to celebrate it too. "So your perfect marriage is one where your husband doesn't want you?" I asked quietly. "My perfect marriage is one where my husband values me for more than just physical things. Where he respects my boundaries and doesn't make me feel guilty for not being interested in all that stuff." What if he is interested in all that stuff? Then he needs to grow up and learn what love really means. That's when I realized she didn't want a husband. She wanted a roommate who split the bills and didn't bother her with inconvenient needs like desire or passion or physical connection. Friday morning, I made my decision. Not in anger, not in spite, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about what your relationship really is. I waited until the following Tuesday when she had her book club meeting. She left the house at 7 p.m. excited to discuss whatever romance novel they were reading this month. The irony wasn't lost on me that she enjoyed reading about passion and desire and fiction, while rejecting it completely in real life. I packed systematically and quietly. Personal clothes, books, electronics, documents, anything that belonged solely to me. Nothing that belonged to both of us. Nothing that would create a legal dispute. I wasn't stealing from her. I was simply removing myself from a situation where my presence was clearly unwanted, where my desires were viewed as character flaws, where my needs were seen as immature demands. I left my wedding ring on the dresser next to her jewelry box along with my house key. No note, no explanation, no dramatic gesture. She'd told me exactly what kind of marriage she wanted. I was simply giving her the opportunity to have it without me. The drive to my brother's house was surreal. 3 years of marriage, ending not with a fight or betrayal, but with the quiet recognition that we wanted fundamentally different things from a relationship. She wanted companionship without passion. I wanted a marriage that included both. She called my phone at 9:47 p.m. I didn't answer. She called 6 more times before midnight. I listened to the voicemails the next morning. The first one was confused. "Hey, where are you? Your stuff is gone. This is weird. Call me back." The second was irritated. "This is ridiculous. Whatever you're trying to prove, just come home and we'll talk about it. You can't just disappear like this." The third was angry. "You can't just leave without talking about this. We're married. You don't get to throw a tantrum and run away like a child." The fourth was pleading. "Please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. If I did something wrong, we can talk about it." The fifth was desperate. "I know you're getting these messages. This is insane. You can't just leave without talking about it. We can work this out." The sixth was back angry. "Fine, be childish, but you're going to have to come back eventually. You can't just abandon a marriage." The seventh was quiet, uncertain. "I keep thinking about our conversation the other night. Did I say something wrong? I thought we were both happy with how things were going." I never called her back. 2 weeks later, she started showing up at my workplace during lunch, demanding to talk. Security had tow-scored her out twice before she got the message that I wasn't going to engage. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks after I left. She contested them, claiming the marriage could be saved with counseling. Her lawyer argued that I had abandoned the marriage without attempting to resolve our differences through proper channels. My lawyer pointed out that a marriage where one spouse celebrates the absence of physical intimacy is a marriage that has already ended. We had attempted to solve our differences through conversation and compromise. She wanted a passionless relationship and I wanted a marriage. Those differences were irreconcilable. During the divorce proceedings, she tried to argue that I'd suddenly changed and become unreasonably demanding. She claimed that I had been perfectly happy with our arrangement until I decided to throw it all away over sex. The court records show her testimony. He never complained about our relationship. We were happy. Then one day, he just decided he wasn't getting enough physical attention and abandoned our marriage. It was completely out of nowhere. Completely out of nowhere. 3 years of gradual rejection, months of clear communication about my needs, weeks of her celebrating my withdrawal, and she characterized my leaving as sudden and unexplained. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. She kept the house but struggled with the mortgage payments on her single income. I learned from mutual friends that she had expected me to return within days, maybe a week at most. She genuinely believed that my leaving was a temporary tantrum rather than a permanent decision based on fundamental incompatibility. 6 months after the divorce was final, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked tired, older, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "We need to talk," she said, sitting down at my table without being invited. "We really don't. I've been thinking about everything that happened. Maybe I was too rigid about some things. Maybe we could try again." "What's changed?" I asked. "I understand now that physical stuff is important to some people. I could try to be more accommodating." Accommodating? She was offering to accommodate my need for intimacy, like it was a quirky preference she could tolerate. "That's not what I wanted," I said quietly. "Then what did you want?" "I wanted a wife who wanted me, not someone who would accommodate me." She stared at me for a long moment. "I didn't want you, just known in that way." "Then you wanted a friend, not a husband." I left her sitting there, and I've never spoken to her since. A year later, I heard through mutual friends that she was dating but having trouble with relationships. Apparently, most men expected physical intimacy at some point, and she couldn't understand why modern dating was so pressure-filled and demanding. She started posting on social media about the unrealistic expectations men have in relationships, the toxic nature of physical desire, and how rare it was to find someone who valued emotional connection over base physical needs. She had learned nothing from our marriage except that men who wanted intimacy were the problem. 2 years later, I was in a relationship with someone who understood that physical intimacy isn't pressure or expectation, but expression. Someone who viewed desire as a gift rather than an imposition. Someone who wanted to be wanted and who wanted me in return. The difference was startling. I had forgotten what it felt like to be with someone who lit up when I touched her, who initiated contact as often as I did, who viewed physical connection as an essential part of emotional intimacy rather than an unfortunate obligation. I had forgotten what it felt like to be desired rather than tolerated. Emma, my current partner, actually thanks me when I kiss her unexpectedly. She pulls me closer instead of going rigid. She suggests intimacy as often as I do. She treats physical connection like a gift we give each other rather than a favor she grants me. "I can't imagine being married to someone who didn't want me," she said one night when I told her about my previous marriage. How lonely that must have been. Lonely. That was exactly what it had been. Lonely in the most profound way possible, lying next to someone who was happier when you didn't want them. Meanwhile, my ex-wife continued posting about her dating struggles, about how hard it was to find mature men who didn't make relationships all about sex, about how society had warped people's understanding of real love. 3 years after our divorce, I learned through a former colleague that she was seeing a therapist who had suggested that her issues with physical intimacy might stem from deeper problems with emotional connection. Apparently, the therapist had pointed out that rejecting physical affection often indicates an inability to be vulnerable in relationships. She had fired the therapist and found a new one who validated her belief that society places too much emphasis on physical connection in romantic relationships. 4 years later, she was still single, still posting about the impossibility of finding someone who shared her mature values around physical intimacy. She had joined online communities for people who identified as having low interest in physical connection, where she found validation for her belief that most people were shallow and over-sexualized. She never seemed to realize that she had found exactly what she claimed to want, a man who loved her without needing physical expression of that love. A man who was content with companionship and conversation. A man who didn't pressure her or have expectations or create drama around intimacy. She had that man for 3 years, and she was happiest when he stopped wanting her. So I gave her exactly what made her happy. I stopped wanting her permanently. The last I heard, she was still single. Still struggling to understand why relationships never worked out for her, still posting about the impossibility of finding someone who understood that real love didn't require physical expression. She got exactly what she asked for. A life free from the pressure of someone wanting her. Free from the complications of physical intimacy. Free from a husband who viewed desire as part of love rather than separate from it. She just never realized that getting what she wanted would cost her everything else. Sometimes when I'm with Emma, laughing about something silly or simply enjoying comfortable silence together. I think about that Wednesday night when I first noticed my ex-wife's relief at my withdrawal. That moment of recognition changed everything. Not because it revealed something new about her, but because it finally made me see what had been true for months. She taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave someone who's happier without you. She wanted peace over passion, comfort over connection, solitude over intimacy. She wanted a marriage that felt like a good friendship with shared expenses. I gave her the peace she craved by removing the source of her discomfort. Me. The haunting part isn't that our marriage ended. Marriages end for all kinds of reasons, and sometimes that's the healthiest outcome for everyone involved. The haunting part is that she celebrated its ending every single day and expected me to celebrate with her. She thought she had trained me to wantless instead of realizing she had taught me that I deserved more. 5 years later, she finally has the perfect relationship she always wanted. No pressure, no expectations, no drama, no demands for physical connection. She's completely alone, and based on her social media presence and the reports from mutual friends, she still doesn't understand why. The most haunting part of all is that she still tells people I left out of nowhere for no reason. She genuinely believes that a marriage where the wife celebrates her husband's lack of desire is a good marriage that was destroyed by his unreasonable expectations. She got exactly what she asked for, and she's been haunted by the consequences ever since. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the